Last night, I received a message from a 45-year-old woman that robbed me of sleep. She wrote to me crying from the bathroom of her house after discovering that the man she believed she was building a future with for 3 years still had active profiles on dating apps. And her question hit me straight in the heart. How is it possible that I, an intelligent, successful woman who understands psychology and relationships, spent 3 years of my life begging for emotional crumbs from someone who only saw me as a temporary option? The answer to this question challenges everything you think you know about male love, because what I'm about to reveal contradicts decades of romantic advice that have kept millions of smart women trapped in emotionally draining yet never nourishing relationships. There is a massive neurological difference between a man who says he loves you and a man who is truly emotionally attached to you. And this difference is not subtle. It doesn't require interpretation or years of psychotherapy. It is obvious, measurable, undeniable. But we've been taught to ignore it, to settle for diluted versions of love, to normalize emotional insecurity as a part of modern romance. And in the last 15 years working with emotionally exhausted women, I've recognized a pattern that led me to a radical conclusion. Most mature women don't need therapy to love better. They need neuropsychological education to recognize when they're truly being loved. Because here's a reality no one wants to name. We've normalized male behaviors that are incompatible with deep emotional bonding. We've excused their unreliability as that's just how they are, their indecision as fear of commitment, their emotional indifference as gender differences. But once you understand how the brain of an emotionally attached man actually works, you realize all of that is nothing more than clever excuses to cover an uncomfortable truth. He's just not that interested. I'm going to tell you something that fundamentally changed my understanding of human relationships and saved the mental health of hundreds of women. In neuroscience, we know that a person's brain literally reorganizes when they develop a deep emotional bond with someone. This isn't poetry or romantic wishful thinking, it's pure physiology. Neural networks form new connections, brain chemistry changes permanently, and that creates concrete, predictable behaviors that cannot be faked over time. A man who is emotionally attached cannot play indifference because his nervous system won't allow it. He cannot be inconsistent because contradiction with you causes genuine cognitive dissonance. He cannot leave you in the dark because his brain craves security and clarity regarding you. So if you feel like you have to decode his feelings like an emotional detective, if you're living in a constant cycle of hope and disappointment, if your mind finds no peace because you don't know where you stand in his priorities, then here's something crucial you need to understand. It's not that your intuition is broken, you're just with someone whose brain hasn't formed a deep emotional bond with you, no matter what his words say. And that brings us to a sobering reality few dare to face. Mature women, especially those who've endured multiple disappointments, develop a dangerous tolerance for emotional mediocrity. They become masters at finding hope in crumbs, interpreting contradictions as positive signs, and justifying behaviors their instincts deeply reject. This adaptability, which once helped them survive toxic relationships, becomes their biggest obstacle when real love finally arrives, because their brain has learned to settle for so little that they no longer know how to receive what gives everything. But here comes the turning point that changes everything. When a man is truly emotionally attached, 10 very specific neurological manifestations appear. Impossible to hide, impossible to fake, and impossible to misinterpret. Knowing these patterns doesn't make you a controlling or demanding woman, it makes you an informed woman who no longer accepts emotional substitutes. The first manifestation I call complete neurological consistency. A man who is emotionally attached to you is predictable, not because he's boring, but because his brain has developed reward circuits directly linked to your emotional well-being. He keeps promises because breaking them causes him real physical discomfort. He calls when he says he will because his reward system activates the moment he fulfills your expectations. This reliability doesn't waver with his mood, isn't affected by work stress, and isn't subject to outside influences. It is a neurological constant. His prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and self-regulation, is fully aligned with the stability of your relationship. He doesn't disappear emotionally after physical intimacy because sex doesn't reduce his motivation. On the contrary, it activates the oxytocin circuits that deepen the emotional bond. His mood doesn't swing suddenly because his brain classifies the relationship as a source of emotional safety. He doesn't leave you waiting for days for an answer because communicating with you has become a neurological need, not a social obligation. And here's a fascinating point I've observed in hundreds of cases. Women who've been in emotionally unstable relationships for a long time don't trust this predictability. Their nervous system, trained to be constantly alert, interprets peace as suspicious, stability as boring, and security as a lack of passion. We've confused emotional chaos with romantic intensity so deeply that when real calm arrives, the brain doesn't know how to handle it. But this stability isn't a lack of passion. It's mature passion. It isn't a lack of feeling. It's regulated feeling. It isn't a lack of love. It's love that has evolved from survival into growth. The second manifestation I call complete identity integration. An emotionally attached man doesn't divide his life into with you and without you. Your existence becomes such a fundamental part of his self-concept that your inclusion in every meaningful area of his life is not a conscious decision. It's a natural consequence of his mental world order. He introduces you to his family, not because it's expected after a while, but because he can no longer emotionally imagine important events without you. He brings you into his circle of friends not to impress, but because his brain has so strongly linked your identity with his own that excluding you would require conscious mental effort. This is what neuropsychology calls fusion of mental representations. Your image doesn't just exist in the romantic area of his brain, but has an active place in his career plans, family decisions, future projections, creative processes, and personal development. And now comes the revolutionary part. This process does not directly depend on the length of the relationship, but on the chemical depth of the bond. I've worked with men who, even after years, treated their partner like a temporary companion, and with others who, after just a few months, had fully integrated the woman into their identity. What determines this integration is not time, but the intensity of the neurological connection. And once this integration occurs, it is irreversible. It's not something that can simply be turned on or off. It becomes part of his core mental architecture. The third manifestation destroys one of the most harmful myths about male psychology. His attitude toward commitment radically changes. We've been sold the idea that men have a natural resistance to commitment, that they are genetically programmed to avoid exclusivity, that fear of commitment is inherently male. But this is only partly true, and highly damaging. A man avoids commitment only when he is unsure of his feelings or when he doesn't see the woman as an essential part of his future. When emotional bonding is deep, the opposite of what many women experience happens. Commitment becomes an urgent emotional need, not a burdensome social expectation. His brain craves safety, clarity, exclusivity, because ambiguity causes real cognitive unease. He doesn't avoid conversations about the future of the relationship. He actively seeks them. He isn't afraid of definitions. He longs for them. Labels aren't a burden for him, but a source of neurological calm. He doesn't see exclusivity as restriction, but as freedom from uncertainty. This happens because deep emotional bonding triggers what neuroscientists call the need for cognitive closure. His brain needs clarity in the relationship, just as it needs to solve a complex math problem. Ambivalence becomes neurologically unpleasant. When women tell me, he says he loves me but doesn't want to talk about the future. He says I'm special but avoids defining the relationship. He says I matter to him but doesn't want exclusivity. The truth is clear. His words and actions describe someone who has not formed a deep emotional bond, regardless of what he may feel on the surface. The fourth manifestation may be the most revealing: spontaneous emotional transparency. Here, the difference between surface-level interest and true connection is most clearly seen. A man who is emotionally bonded expands his emotional vocabulary, and only with you. It's not that men are emotionally closed by nature. Many suppress feelings out of fear of rejection, judgment, or losing control. But real bonding dissolves those barriers. His brain sees you and your relationship as a completely safe space. He tells you directly, clearly, and concretely how he feels. Because being emotionally vulnerable with you has become natural, even pleasant. You don't have to dig up his feelings like an archaeologist. There's no guessing around silence, tone, or ambiguous messages. His honesty flows naturally because his nervous system is completely relaxed in your presence. But there's more. He develops a genuine curiosity about your emotional world. He doesn't ask how you're doing out of obligation, but because your feelings directly affect his own. He has developed what neuroscience calls specific neurological empathy. Your pain causes him physical discomfort. Your joy activates his reward system. He is so emotionally attuned to you that he often knows how you feel before you say anything, not because he's psychic, but because his brain has become sensitive to your micro-expressions, shifts in energy, and behavioral patterns. The fifth quality is something mature women especially value after toxic relationships: deeply rooted, unconditional respect. And by respect, I don't just mean politeness, I mean something far deeper. Your emotional well-being has become his neurological priority. This means, even in conflict, even when he's frustrated, even when he doesn't understand your choices, his conduct remains respectful. This isn't conscious self-control, it's a neurologically anchored response, and he doesn't use sarcasm to gain control. He doesn't use silence as punishment. He doesn't belittle you to elevate himself. His prefrontal cortex regulates destructive impulses because hurting you causes him real discomfort, almost like hurting himself. This respect also shows in how he talks about you when you're not around, how he handles conflict in front of others, and how he reacts when someone criticizes you. He defends you, not because he has to, but because his brain perceives an attack on you as an attack on himself. I've observed something fascinating. Men who are deeply emotionally bonded develop a kind of psychological shield around their partner. It's not toxic possessiveness. It's an instinctive neurological defense mechanism. His brain perceives your emotional peace as part of his own sense of safety. The sixth manifestation is beautiful: closeness without agenda. This is one of the biggest differences between superficial attraction and true emotional bonding. A man with shallow interest seeks your company for specific reasons: fun, sex, validation, escape from loneliness. An emotionally bonded man seeks your closeness because his nervous system regulates in your presence, and you don't need to be cheerful. You don't need to entertain him. You don't need to constantly be the perfect hostess or intellectual muse. To his brain, your simple presence equals deep neurological well-being. He seeks you when he's tired because he truly rests with you, when he's stressed because his cortisol drops with you, when he's happy because his dopamine rises with you. It's not about what you do, it's about what you are to his nervous system. This closeness is not pathological dependency. It's healthy emotional reciprocity. His life doesn't fall apart without you, but it's undeniably better with you. And the most fascinating part, the more time he spends with you, the more he wants to be with you. No saturation, no boredom. Closeness creates even more capacity for closeness. The seventh quality is psychologically fascinating: spontaneous mental presence. He thinks of you randomly throughout the day, without reason, without any specific trigger. He sees something that would make you laugh, and instantly wants to share it. He overhears a conversation you'd find interesting, and already plans to tell you about it. His brain has formed automatic associations between you and hundreds of daily stimuli. This isn't obsession, this is cognitive integration. This happens because deep emotional connection exponentially expands your presence in his mental architecture. You don't just occupy romantic space in his brain, you play an active role in numerous neural centers: memory, planning, creative thinking, decision-making, and emotional processing. He doesn't only think of you when he's lonely or bored. You surface in his consciousness while he's working, exercising, spending time with others, even when he's focusing on complex tasks. Your mental image has become part of his inner dialogue. The eighth manifestation shifts the power dynamic in the relationship. He naturally includes you in his decision-making processes, in both major matters and daily concerns. Not because he's dependent on you or has lost his independence, but because your perspective has become a fixed part of his thinking. Your voice, your way of judging, your specific wisdom, he has internalized all of it. When he's facing an important decision, he automatically asks himself, what would she think of this? How would it affect our life? What would she notice that I might be missing? He seeks your advice on professional decisions because he truly values your intelligence. He trusts you in family conflicts because he knows your emotional insight. He plans the future with you because he literally can't imagine making meaningful decisions without considering your well-being and your opinion. This isn't a loss of male independence, it's a step toward mature mutual connection. You're no longer just his partner. You've become part of his emotional and intellectual operating system, and this even applies to decisions that don't directly involve you, because his brain no longer processes life separately from yours. The ninth manifestation is concrete and measurable. You are a real priority, not a convenient option. This shows in clear facts how he handles his time, energy, attention, and resources. He doesn't only reach out when it suits him or when other plans fall through. He doesn't push you aside when a more exciting opportunity appears. He doesn't constantly make you feel like you're competing with his job, friends, hobbies, or family for attention. His brain has restructured its value hierarchy, and you are at the top. This doesn't mean he neglects other responsibilities, but when he has to allocate limited time and energy, he naturally makes decisions in your favor. He stays with you when you're sick, even if he has important appointments, because your vulnerability triggers his deepest protective instinct. He celebrates your professional achievements even if he's going through a hard time, because your happiness activates his reward system. He gives you his best time, even when emotionally drained, because time with you recharges him. This is not a sacrifice, it's a natural emotional investment. His brain has learned to interpret your happiness as his own well-being. Investing in your happiness is neurologically equal to investing in himself. The 10th and most profound manifestation is called mutual evolutionary inspiration. The relationship with you inspires him to become a better version of himself, and he has the same effect on you. But it's not a forced transformation like we see in toxic relationships where someone bends themselves into exhaustion to be enough for the other. It's organic growth that arises when secure love unlocks the authentic potential in both partners. In his presence, you feel bolder in pursuing your dreams, smarter because he values your mental strength, more generous because his love fills your inner reserves. You are more yourself because you no longer have to perform to be loved. He also experiences the same personal expansion, not because he's trying to change, but because deep love creates a neurological environment where the best version of a person naturally grows. As if the brain, once it feels truly safe, can finally redirect its energy from survival to growth. When these 10 neurological patterns are present in a relationship, you're experiencing something that goes far beyond classic infatuation. You're experiencing what modern psychology calls optimized, secure attachment in adulthood, the most mature, nourishing, and developmentally supportive form of emotional connection between humans. The benefits go well beyond romantic fulfillment. Your mental health improves because chronic uncertainty disappears. Your immune system gets stronger because relationship stress dissolves. Your creativity grows because your energy is no longer invested in fear. Your ability to handle life's challenges multiplies because you're operating from a stable emotional foundation. But if after reading about these 10 patterns you realize they don't apply to your relationship, that you don't have them, never had them, or have been waiting for them for years, then there's something you need to understand that might change your entire emotional life. There is nothing wrong with you. Deep emotional bonding cannot be forced, negotiated, or trained into someone. through endless patience with a person who is neurologically unavailable. You can't love someone enough to make them become who you need. You can't give so much that their capacity for connection suddenly awakens. You can't be perfect enough for their brain to finally see you as a priority. Sometimes the problem isn't that you don't deserve that kind of love. Sometimes the problem is that you've invested your most precious emotional energy in people who simply cannot return it, regardless of their good intentions and beautiful words. We've confused emotional pressure with depth, complexity with true passion, fear of commitment with love. We've accepted emotional ups and downs as normal because we've forgotten what true safety feels like. Emotional maturity gives us something priceless that younger women often don't yet possess: the neurological ability to tell the difference between what excites us in the short term and what nourishes us in the long term, to recognize what we want and what we truly need to thrive. Every mature woman deserves a love that affirms her inner worth every day, not one that constantly makes her doubt herself. She deserves emotional security that calms her nervous system, not chronic anxiety masquerading as passion. She deserves to be consciously chosen and constantly celebrated, not merely tolerated until something better comes along. The kind of love that manifests through these 10 neurological patterns is not a romantic fantasy. It exists, it's possible, and it's available to every woman who has the courage not to settle for less than what her brain, heart, and future truly need to flourish. Your only job is to recognize these patterns when they appear, and to value yourself enough to move toward them, even if it means walking away from situations that offer you less than you deserve.